is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, the book club, covering Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. In this episode, Natasha didn't think that she would like this book that much because she thought dinosaurs on paper would be too ridiculous. But it turns out this is a really, really fun read. Welcome to Unspoiled. Right. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Natasha.
And I'm Money.
And we are going to talk about some pop culture shit today.
Yeah. Some 20 years out of date pop culture stuff. So
yeah.
I think this technically qualifies as nostalgia now.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I was talking about this, actually, with Rashawn on our Westworld show, because Michael Crichton also wrote Westworld. And she hasn't seen this movie since it first came out in theaters. And I'm just like, part of why I didn't want to read this book, I was resistant to it when people suggested it, is because the movie holds up so well that I was convinced the book would not be able to do that in the same way. And I was wrong. I was very wrong.
I had the same thing going in, and there were a lot of things that I liked when I was a kid that I'm not happy with now, but that is more a testimony to what middle school money found entertaining rather than Michael Crichton's writing skill. So,
yes, that was one of the things that I mentioned, is that I think there are parts of this book that I would have been really bored by if I were reading it, 10, 15 years ago, but now as an adult, the whole logistics of the park and everything are fascinating to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love the detail. Yeah, so do we want to talk about Crichton?
Let's talk about fucking Crichton here.
Okay. So, from what I know about Michael Crichton is that he's an incredibly prolific writer, and it feels like his gift is he's really good at writing things that film well.
That is a really good way to say that, because I could not believe when I started to look into it, the number of books that got made into film. It's nuts. It's nuts.
Right.
Like things that I had no idea he was even involved with. Like Westworld. When I found that out, I was like, really? What? I'm already covering something of his? Yeah.
Yeah. And, so he'd done his research and he was like, you know what? I'm not going to writers don't generally make very much money. So I'm going to go to med school. And he graduated med school. I don't think he was ever licensed to practice, but he is technically a doctor, or was. The man has been dead for 10 years now, so.
Yeah, another thing that was shocking to me was I did not know that he was dead, because his name is so everywhere still.
Right.
That I just figured he was still out there producing stuff.
And there was a period of about 5 years where I read pretty much everything he ever wrote. Mm-hmm. So, I think his first screenwriting was Westworld, like you mentioned, which was a good movie, if a little like Yul Brynner frowning at the camera a lot. But then he did The Andromeda Strain, which was where he kind of found his groove, and it's like they call him the techno thriller writer,
right?
Where he does a lot of really intense background on what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then, puts scientists in these really dicey situations. Yeah,
and I feel like there is... I just don't know if this could have been pulled off, a lot of this, without his medical background. The detail that he goes into with some of this stuff, I'm wondering, would this whole section have to be here's the general gist, and then you hand it over to somebody who does have a degree and experience in this stuff to, basically come up with the entire concept, because I don't know where I would even begin as somebody who had an idea like this, but didn't have the language to get it across the way that he does.
Right. And I do want to point out that he's he's a lot better at sounding like he knows what he's talking about than he is about knowing what he's talking about, which is perfect for young men in their teens. So
yes,
makes
true.
them feel super smart. And everyone who read the book when I was a kid thought they knew everything about genetics. And then we went into AP biology and we're like, what? Michael Crichton lied to us?
Oh my God. I was like, have you heard this story about him writing an essay? He
Yes.
like basically took the whole thing from Orwell or something.
Oh, it was J.D. Salinger.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So he was in a writing class in college, and he didn't like his professor because, let's be honest, he was kind of the world's biggest asshole. Mm-hmm. And he made a point by turning in an essay by J.D. Salinger and got an F on it. And he's like, haha, my professor doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah. Conveniently excluding like whether or not the essay was any good, whether or not it was relevant to the course. And yeah, so...
yeah, the idea that just because somebody is a famous writer that is mostly seen to be excellent does not change the fact that writing is subjective. So
Right.
they are free to not like something. Just because you like it does not mean that it is like objectively good. But you know, whatever, it's fine.
Right. So as far as the rest of his life, he wrote a lot more books, and I kind of fell off around the time he wrote Timeline. I kind of got sick of it all. But he's got some incredible books, and at the end of the podcast, I kind of want to go over some of his work that's really good that readers should read. And also, he created ER and was the not the showrunner, but like the executive producer for a long time. And I know that I used to watch ER religiously, and my parents hated it because they're both doctors. And they said, everything in this show is medically accurate, but statistically bullshit. Like, the things that happen in this hospital would never, ever happen. That is just, like, you know...
Gotcha.
A meteor hitting and then a helicopter crashing. Like, all these things keep happening. And then these really obscure medicinal... or these conditions that have existed in a couple of journals because they're so rare, they just routinely show up there, you know?
Right.
So... my parents have said, like, if you want to find the perfect medical show, you combine the medicine of ER with the dynamics of Scrubs.
I knew you were going to say Scrubs. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and he became a climate change denier late in life,
God,
which was
did he?
really, he even wrote an entire book about how it was bullshit. And then he would do petty things like people he didn't like. He would make them characters in his book and give them terrible deaths. And like, so Overdue said this, but I'm going to repeat it here. God give me the confidence of a mediocre white man. That white man was Michael Crichton.
And you know what's kind of the most perfect, like, in the book example of this is that, and I'm, you know, I want to be like, well, a lot of this stuff we've only recently become aware of, but in the prologue where he's describing the discovery of DNA, he does the crediting of Watson and Crick, but the person who actually discovered the helix shape and the whole concept of DNA was Rosalind Franklin, a woman whose research was basically like stolen.
Yeah.
And she was shut out. So yeah,
and we are definitely going to talk about Crichton's history with female characters too, because
or you know, the one female character.
That's a thing. So, so I haven't seen you post about a book a lot since I think probably Rebecca while you were reading it. So tell us what you found so exciting.
Well, I went into this kind of thinking that I guess I didn't realize how much of the book was pruned away for the movie. And I don't mean that in terms of the, you know, internal monologues and things like that, which you just expect to not be in a movie, but that there are whole sections of this book that really turn into the sequel, or turned into Lost World, which is what, the fourth one?
No, Lost World is the second. So
what's the fourth one that came out just recently? Jurassic World, where it comes down to like the aesthetics and crowd pleasing nature and so there was a lot in this that felt like he was looking at this from so many different angles that I found really fascinating. And also, I was pleased that some of the changes for the movie were actually improvements over what was done in the book initially.
Right.
Which I didn't really expect. I figured that as much as I resisted reading this, because the whole idea of this park dedicated to dinosaurs is something that I feel like I give a lot more leeway to when it's like a summer blockbuster movie versus in a novel. And I was prepared for the novel to skate over the like biological process and all of that a lot, like pretty much the way the movie did, where it's like, we're going to give you this little blurb and explain it, and then the rest of it is going to be dinosaur chasing, basically.
Right.
And instead, he gives way more background and way more thought is put into what it would really mean to build something like this, and the politics of it in terms of like taking an island from another country and lying about it, about what you're doing there, and the population around the island being affected but not being treated as consequential. There was just a lot more real world grounding than I thought there was going to be, and that I found really compelling.
What I love is that John Hammond is, he relies on automation so that he doesn't have to pay workers and worry about them unionizing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they didn't mention that, but that was clearly what was going on here.
Right.
So.
Yeah. All right, well, let's just get into it then, because now that you've mentioned Hammond, I want to talk about stuff.
All right, let's talk about this fantastic book.
And I feel like, you know, part of me wants to resist doing the comparisons to the movie throughout the whole episode, but there's really no way I'm avoiding that. Like, that is the context that I had walking into this. I've seen the movie at least a dozen times. So there's just no way to separate those things for me. So forgive me, but I feel like if you've watched the movie, there's no way that you're reading it without making these same comparisons yourself. So I'm going to address them.
To be fair, I think a significant number of our listeners are going to have seen the movie and not read the book.
Yeah, exactly. This is one of those things where people don't even realize sometimes that there was a book at all. Like
Right.
Jaws, you know? So John Hammond is like such a dickhead.
Yes.
Such a dickhead. And he dies, spoiler alert, which he does not in the movie. And that whole thing just went in a direction I did not see coming. He sort of, in the movie, played as this, like, affable and over-ambitious dinosaur lover who, yes, he's going to make a ton of money off this, but that's not his objective.
Right.
And in the book, it is 100% his objective, and anybody who stands in his way at all, stands in his way being a very subjective measurement of what they're doing, is on his shit list pretty much forever.
Right.
Like,
and he's a charlatan and a fraud, and he cuts corners, he pulls little tricks to get investor money. Mm-hmm. John Hammond is just a terrible fucking person in this book, and I kind of prefer this version because that's the person who would fuck up Jurassic Park this hard. Agreed.
Yeah, it's sort of there's an implication in the movie, I feel like, that if it hadn't been for Newman, I will never not call him Newman, although he's called what, Nedry?
Dennis Nedry.
In the book, that if it hadn't been for him, things would have been okay. The park probably would have been able to carry off all right. But he fucked things up, and so then everything goes off the rails. In the book, it really feels like, yes, he fucked everything up, but this would have happened at some point.
Right. It was already happening. The dinosaurs were breeding. The raptors were out. Mm-hmm. Shit was already in process of going sideways. And to be honest, this time, coming back to this book after 20 years, having spent a good deal of time doing pretty much what Dennis Nedry does, I am kind of on his side.
There was a lot of moments where I was like, oh my God, I totally get it, guy. I really get it.
I never did before, but I'm like, oh my God, I have had this client who tells you they need to build something, but they won't tell you what for. And then they won't pay for the changes on the other end. And you end up personally working weekends to ship this goddamn thing because you're afraid it'll go to court. And oh my God, it's like, you know, Dennis, I kind of want to pour one out for you because you're not as bad as everyone thought you were.
Yeah, I mean, the whole, like, in the film, there's nothing is paid in terms of, like, understanding why he's disgruntled in the first place. It's really just played as somebody offered him a bunch of money, and he was like, well, yeah, I'm not going to turn down the money. Fuck yeah. And the book, it's not as if I feel like he wouldn't have gone for this if he weren't already disgruntled, because I think he probably would have. Mm-hmm. But that really gives you a lot more, like, dimension to what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And that extra fuck you to this guy who is just has these completely unrealistic expectations. I mean, it's classic management, which is what he says, that we're going to, from on high, have these absurd expectations and give you none of the tools to actually, like, reach those expectations.
Right.
Yeah. So Nedry, the only thing that just got to me over and over again was how constant the fat shaming was. I was just like, really? Can we not always make the character who's greedy also fat? Is that something we can just not do sometimes?
Yeah, and that's also, with 20 years experience, this is another reason I feel a little more kinship with Nedry than anyone else in this book. And I also like that he went out of his way to point out that this is not an uncommon thing. Like, Dodgson's entire career is finding disgruntled employees and getting them to steal shit.
Yep.
So
yeah,
if it wasn't
Dodgson's
Nedry,
background too,
it would have been Arnold or Wu or someone, you know.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that the way that Hammond operates really will make plenty of people that you can prey on for this kind of thing. He creates his own enemies because he's completely unwilling to listen.
Right.
So yeah, and I did like that whole thing with Dodgson too, where he's like in the meeting and nobody really will like be on the record saying, yeah, go ahead and steal that shit. But that's essentially what's happening.
Right. I do want to bring up something here, since we're talking about, like, the beginning part where he's kind of setting the stage. Mm-hmm. He does have a thing where he tends to overset the stage, and just, like, it'll be sometimes 100, 150 pages before he drops what's actually going on. I think it was like 250 for timeline when it's finally revealed there is time travel. But what he forgets is that the person reading the book has seen the title. So they know what's happening. And it is super entertaining. It just goes on super long. So,
well, see, that's interesting because you're saying what he forgets is that they've seen the title, but I'm not sure he forgets it. Maybe he knows that since they're aware of it, he can do this really slow reveal, and they won't grow totally impatient because they're aware of where he's headed with it.
I mean, maybe, but it got super frustrating to me. Like, everything was interesting, but I was kind of done with characters who don't know what's going on.
Gotcha. Yeah. That was... It's interesting because, like, all right, to back it up a little bit, the book opens with 2 dinosaur attacks.
Yeah.
And I think they're compies, right? Is that
one of them is a raptor attack. The kid who goes to the clinic. No, right. The clinic. The first one is the clinic.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, and that was a raptor attack. And then there were 2 compy attacks. There was the baby and the little girl.
Right. And that right there caught me completely off guard because the whole plot of the second movie is like, well, what if we tried to move them and they got free?
Right.
And that's we haven't even gotten into the main thrust of the story, and we already have dinosaurs on the loose outside of the park already. Right. I was 100% not prepared for that at all. And I really enjoy setting that up straight from the start and then having everybody in the rest of the book panicking about what if that were to happen,
right?
When we know that's already happening. Like, I really liked that. Mm-hmm. And then when we actually do get to the park and we finally find out that he's created dinosaurs, it's halfway through the book, a third of the way in.
Yeah, and it's like there's these two lines he drops. One is when Lewis Dodgson is talking to the board, and he's like, "Dinosaurs, they're cloning dinosaurs."
Right,
and
right.
This is when you're supposed to go, but like we already know this because we've looked at the cover of the book. And then there's also when Alan Grant looks up and sees a dinosaur, and I'm like, hey, Alan, you could have figured it out by now. Mm-hmm. So, like, we're having an amusement park and we want your opinion. I only know about dinosaurs. Yeah, but we want your opinion. We'll pay you a bunch of money. Come on, dude.
Yeah, it's, I guess, just the whole idea of it being completely beyond the scope of what he even thought was possible.
Right.
You know, so it's like somebody could drop a bunch of hints that make you go, they probably have a time machine, but you're never really going to entertain that idea for more than like 30 seconds, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess so. It's just...
Yeah,
no one in this book is genre savvy, so...
That's sort of like in Bag of Bones, you know, halfway through the book, you finally get to the part with the ghost, and it's just like the whole first half is this like sad writer who can't write, and what a bummer. And I'm just like, can we get this rolling here? Because when we recorded on it with Overdue, I think it was Andrew who was like, so around the part where the book finally gets rolling is blah blah blah, and I was like, yeah, and that's halfway through. So it's a sort of like, I have like very mixed feelings about it, because I agree with you that characters that don't know what's going on for so long gets frustrating. At the same time, he revealed very early on that there's dinosaur things happening for us as the reader outside of that whole thing. But does that make it like something I can bear with more, or does that make it even more annoying for me?
It wouldn't bother me if it wasn't such a pattern for him. Gotcha.
So yeah, okay. Let's talk. Can we talk about Ian Malcolm? Because
I think we might argue about Ian Malcolm. Let's do this.
Okay. So Ian Malcolm, who was played by Jeff Goldblum in the movie, is a chaos theorist who winds up actually dying in the book. Everybody pretty much dies.
I'm going to stop you there.
Okay.
He doesn't die, actually. So there was, once the movie was made, they're like, dude, Mike, you got to write a sequel. And he's like, all right, I'll write a sequel. They couldn't get Sam Neill back. They could only get Jeff Goldblum back. So he was like, I got to retcon him alive.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They also had to retcon Gennaro and my favorite ever, Muldoon, dead in between books, which bugged the shit out of me.
Yeah, why is Muldoon dead? Well, dysentery. All right, let's not get into this, but that is really funny, though. Like, that the movie influenced so much. It's sort of like the George R. R. Martin thing.
Right.
Where he's like, well, I was going to have her die, but she's actually really fun, so I'm going to do more with her. So, obviously in the movie, Jeff Goldblum is a sex machine, who flirts shamelessly with Dr. Sattler, and she is very into it, and like, oh my goodness.
Well, he's 30s Jeff Goldblum, mm-hmm.
Jeff Goldblum can get it. Age, irrelevant. He could get it fair. Today. He could get it in the 90s. I don't care. I have had a thing for him forever. But Ian Malcolm in the book is described as like kind of balding and sort of like reedy looking. And he's in all black, but it's like he's got black sneakers on, which immediately puts me in mind of like a dude who is trying to look tough, but still shops at Kmart.
Well, I'm a fan of black sneakers just because they can kind of pass for decent, work attire if you're not looking too hard.
Maybe.
I'm
side-eyeing you.
Yeah, that's fair. But, that's, my aunt does it. Everyone in the Bay Area does it. It's have a pair of black sneakers if you have to go to a conference, because we all go to work in sneakers and we don't like putting on actual leather shoes. So
okay. And when I don't even want to say flirts with Dr. Sattler, he just makes a gross leering comment about her legs. She is not receptive and just stares at him like, I can't believe you just fucking said that. And that's pretty much where it ends.
Yeah, and he's such an asshole, and I hate him. And he's clearly written to be an asshole, and I hate that he's right about everything, because he's it's like if mansplaining was a person, you know?
Yeah, he's the one thing about John Hammond that I get, because John hates him so much. And of course he hates him because his whole deal is your park is gonna fail, the end. You need to not do this. Don't even try. Which Hammond has, his backup immediately anyway. But as you get to know him, and him I mean Malcolm, you start to really understand more and more why Hammond hates him.
Yes, and why I can even deal with the mansplaining and the attitude if he would actually give his reasons. Mm-hmm. I know that it's more dramatic for him to hold back this information until it's convenient for the plot, but for fuck's sake, dude, I'm not going to like you if you do this, Yeah. If he got bit by a zombie, he probably wouldn't tell anyone.
Oh, God. Probably. So, yeah, the whole thing with him is basically that these people are out here trying to recreate beings that they do not know anything about, that lived in a world that is completely different in terms of the atmosphere and the food available and the balance of the ecosystem. Everything is different. And they're just gonna, try and keep this thing that's alive completely isolated from the rest of the world? That's not gonna happen. It's impossible to do. And he is so certain of this that to him the idea of even trying is just super arrogant. Crazy arrogant.
Yeah.
And he waxes philosophical a bunch of times about this. Every time he gets a chance to talk, it's like a 3-page monologue.
Yep. He kind of does an Ayn Rand thing where he just rants about stuff. And I had to take a break when he starts talking about, we can't destroy the world. We can maybe make it unlivable for us. And I'm like, That's great, Ian. That's a semantic difference. You know why? Because we're human beings, and it's not going to matter to us if
Well, and see, that's interesting, because that's one of the few things that I actually liked, is that, he's talking about how arrogant this guy is, and the guy's like, well, but humans will be dead, and it's sort of exactly what Malcolm's saying. It's like, yeah, see, only humans will care. That is arrogant. We aren't the Earth is fine without us, which. That's something that only I did this weird sort of retreat one time where you were supposed to meditate and it was like a sweat lodge type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I was only a teenager at the time. I think I was 18 or 17. And I did this meditation where we were in the middle of the woods in this mountainous area. And at the time I was really concerned about the environment and everything that seems to be happening. And I was having that be my focal point for my meditation. And I suddenly got this sense as I was in the middle of it that something was telling me, oh, we've been through this before. We will be fine. As if almost like the trees were talking to me or something. You're the ones that need to worry. And I was simultaneously very relieved and very oh, that never occurred to me. Maybe we can fuck shit up, but it's kind of just screwing ourselves, and everything else is going to be able to carry on. Which was, kind of, like I said, reassuring, and also oh yeah, maybe what we think of as surviving is so incredibly self-centered that it's not worth calling what it is, which is environmentalism, when you're really talking about whether we'll be able to continue on.
I get all of that, but that is not helpful when we're worried about being eaten by dinosaurs,
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, I think you can excuse it a little because he's feverish and raving a tiny bit,
and
but
super
at that point,
high.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. He's taking morphine by then.
Guys, never smoke weed with Ian Malcolm. He's going to be the worst pot buddy ever.
Oh, God, he probably would, too. Yep. The one that I just was kind of like eye rolling a bit was the idea of inherited wealth with the with science versus like other disciplines which you have to really learn.
Yeah, and they said that in the movie too. So
I get what he's saying in a sense, but it's just like I don't know. It's just such an oversimplification.
Yeah,
you know?
That's fair. So, what other characters were you surprised by?
Well, of course, Lex.
Yeah. Lex is terrible.
Lex is the actual worst. I'm trying to think of another character in a book that I know I was supposed to kind of care about that I disliked as much as Lex. And I can't think of anybody. And I'm sure there's one that if you brought it up, I'd be like, oh, right, yeah. But holy shit, she is insufferable. And for those who are not aware, Tim and Lex in the movies are the two kids, his grandchildren, that get invited to the park. And they really treat it as if, like, he just wants to show off the park and, like, get a sense of how kids would react. But in the book, it's much more calculated, where he's hoping that if Gennaro sees how much children love it, that he'll encourage the investors to stay the course.
Hammond is a stone cold bitch.
Yeah, he is. Like, everything he does is 100% calculated. And in the movie, Lex is older, and she's the one that's got computer experience while Tim's the dinosaur nut. In the book, dinosaur Tim is also computer Tim. And
I don't think that's
Lex
really
is...
fair, because we have to remember that this is set in 1989. This is before the personal computer was really a thing. Mm-hmm. So there was no such thing as a kid who had real computer experience at this point.
Okay, but I mean, he's still put in that position.
Yeah, he is the one who figures out how to use it.
Because Lex is so young that she wouldn't do anything. Because in the book, she's actually younger than Tim. And she's basically just there to whine and be a problem that they need to solve and
get shit
fuck things up. That way she can... We have another moment of being chased by a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Right.
Yeah, that whole scene where she's trying not to cough... That was the only time that I was really, book? Really? We're just going to do the, oh God, I suddenly have to sneeze. Like, that's really what we're doing here? Okay. She is constantly, I'm hungry. Where are we? Why don't we go back? This is boring. They're not moving. They're not doing anything. Oh my God. You don't know what you're doing. Why are you doing... Well, if you know what you're doing, then just do it. Well, why aren't you doing it then? I swear to God, you can talk as much as you want about how, well, she's a kid and, kids were gonna... No, I was not this way. I know plenty of other kids who were not this way. She is insufferable and I hate her and I wish she got eaten immediately.
Right. It's
100%.
Yeah, Lex is super annoying and I don't like her either. Tim carries all the weight and he gets all the POV points. Mm-hmm. So he's also a lot more resourcremember in survival situations. Like, I love that he gets out of the car in the tree himself. Mm-hmm. And he remembers the night vision goggles. Like, why were those in the movie?
The night vision goggles?
Yeah, they were there, but nothing happened with them.
I guess they didn't. I don't really remember, to be honest. I remember them trying them on. And the guy who's supposed to be Gennaro being like, are they heavy? That means they're expensive. Put them down.
Yeah.
But that's all I really remember. Yeah, and when he lures one into the walk-in with the stakes, I really liked, too. Like, the fact that occurred to him to do. I was like, nice one, buddy. Yeah, I mean, there's a moment even when she's like, he says something about how Dad doesn't always know what to do. And she says, just because you're not his favorite. And I was like, oh, bitch, listen. I really wanted Grant to say something to her and he doesn't. I was like, Guy, are you really just going to sit there and listen to her be like this and not course correct at all? Like, come on. But yeah, she's awful. So that was different. And Dr. Sattler, who for some reason, as the Overdue gents pointed out when they reviewed this book, is constantly called Ellie instead of being called by her last name like all of the other
there is a reason there.
Now, what's that?
She's a grad student. It's barely mentioned, but she is actually not a doctor yet.
But is John Hammond a doctor?
No, Hammond and Gennaro, but they're all adults, and Ellie's supposed to be a lot younger. And I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that was something that shocked me. Oh wait, you're still in grad school. You are one of Grant's students.
Right.
This is a very different person. So
yeah, in the movie there's a romantic implication
right
between her and Grant, and they're not married, but they're clearly into each other. And they don't go anywhere near that with the two of them in this. Grant's older and she's younger.
Crichton is not. I don't think he's any good at writing romance, so he doesn't. Unlike George R.R. Martin, who's let's have awkward sex all over the place.
Oh my god, that guy needs to really cool his jets a little bit on those.
I don't mind it. It's because sex can be awkward and gross and silly, and I think it's kind of true to life, and it's a little refreshing. It's just don't put so much of it.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, and there are definitely descriptive terms that I could do without. If you're going to include it, fine. But do you need? I'm not even going to get into it. But you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
So, yeah, she's not quite as involved in things as I remembered either. She has her roles, and I enjoyed that. But I really wanted her to be more involved, and really, she's not. She's just not, and she's the only woman in this entire operation.
Right. And the one who shocked me with his level of involvement was Gennaro.
Yes.
And I'm actually a fan of this version of Gennaro. I know we don't get a whole lot of him. All of his characterization happens when he's off the island and having these conversations. But one thing, when I was a kid, I didn't realize this is why I liked it, but having an audience surrogate who is not running from the dinosaurs, who's trying to make the park work again, I think was super helpful. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't give Gennaro a whole lot of character, but it does give him a lot to do and a lot to interact with. So it's through his eyes we kind of get to see everyone else and what they're up to.
And I like that because it's a real simplification in the film where Gennaro's just this kind of Weasley grasping guy who is he's much less concerned about the safety implications and much more concerned about the monetization and potential for, what do you call it when you make merchandising? Yeah. And I like that he's constantly concerned about safety.
Right.
He is constantly being are you serious? This is a bad idea. Wait, what if they got off the island? Or what if they did this? Or you have it set up so that this isn't even in place yet? And I appreciated that not only all of that, but he is kind of fit. And there is the whole thing with the raptor nest at the end where he just straight up does not want to do this. But he isn't a huge coward. He's not the one that runs and leaves the kids, for example. Right. And it turns out that the guy who does run and leave the kids had a previous encounter and saw someone get eaten by a raptor.
Right.
So that guy isn't just a coward, although that is arguable. He's also traumatized. He's having a PTSD kind of moment there where he just straight up cannot think of doing anything but running. His body just does its thing without his brain getting involved.
Let's not forget that Malcolm also ran. In the show or in the movie, he makes himself the distraction so that Grant and the kids can get away. But in the book, he just fucking runs.
Mm-hmm. Although he does wait to run until they can't see the truck that the kids were in anymore.
Right.
That Jeep is gone. And once he realizes it's gone, it seems like that's the moment for him where he's basically seems to feel like the kids are a lost cause and are probably dead anyway.
Right.
But yeah, most definitely. He's not a hero at all. So yeah, those are like the main character differences. And then there's the character that wasn't in the movie at all. And what is his name?
Muldoon?
Muldoon.
Muldoon
Yes,
was in the movie.
He was?
Yeah, clever girl. Yeah, and Muldoon...
But he gets killed like really early, right?
No, he's the last one to die.
Is he?
Yeah.
I don't even remember. Wow. He's just not factoring into my mind at all. Muldoon
is my favorite, and it wasn't until this time when I was listening to the audiobook when the voice actor gave him... it very much sounded like a black African accent. Because I'd seen the movie, I'd always pictured him as white, but now seeing him as this black guy who's seen a lot of shit and doesn't care about the profitability. He's trying to keep people alive. He's the only one who stands up to Hammond and tells him to just fucking can it.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Like, I was super happy that he lived, and I'm super mad they killed him between books. So
yeah, that's some bullshit.
Yeah, it really is. It's fucking terrible. So yeah, I feel like Muldoon is kind of the hero of this. Grant is a close second, but Muldoon is the one who's really got his shit together and really, is a realist about all of this.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think that's why I didn't realize he was the same character, because he's so involved right from the start. Mm-hmm. And is really telling Hammond the truth, the unvarnished, really uncomfortable, inconvenient truth. That these creatures are, especially the raptors, they really should not be a tourist attraction. They're too legit, man.
Yeah.
And Wu is the one that basically goes to Hammond and is like, hey, we could make these animals slower and more docile and
cuddlier.
Yeah. And Hammond is just really acting like he's only concerned with the accuracy. And I'm like, I wonder how long that's going to last, though. Like, if this whole thing had been able to start off without a hitch, I give it like 8 months before Wu got brought into his office and asked, so tell me more about what you mean.
I got the distinct impression that if it hadn't been Wu's idea, if it had been Hammond's idea, he would have been fine with it, because Hammond is just that kind of asshole who doesn't like his employees telling him what's up.
Interesting. Yeah, you're probably right. So what he would do is not listen to Wu here, and then in 8 months gone to a different geneticist and been like, so I had this concept.
I feel like if Wu had just kept his mouth shut, Hammond would have come onto that idea eventually and told Wu to do it.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I just like, if you're worrying about making money and merchandising, creating creatures that are more pet-like is just going to be hand in hand with that, Well,
there's also the problem that, like, his investors are spooked. He needs to launch this and start bringing in revenue, because it's been 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's like Wu is right, but it's also going to take him a few generations to get them where he needs them to be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so... and Wu was another character that I didn't expect to be as involved as he is. Because in the film, he's really only in the lab.
Right. They have this weird thing in the film where it's like, everybody except these important people leave for the weekend.
Right. Yeah.
There's nobody else on the island. And here he says, well, we run a crew of 20. And like, I think we meet 6 or 7 of them. And I think a couple of the unnamed people survive, but we know a couple more die. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Wu's, oh man, there's a moment because he suggests this thing. Hammond like basically doesn't want to hear it. And later on, Hammond, after everything has gone to shit, Wu is dead. Everything is in chaos. Hammond goes to take a walk. And he starts thinking to himself about how Wu really wasn't the right man for the job because he didn't have vision. Which I loved that whole sequence because he's such a fucking one-track mind. I can't possibly be wrong. it couldn't possibly be that this idea just doesn't work. It's that I chose the wrong people to carry out my flawless idea.
Right.
And Hammond breaking his ankle because he decided to install a fucking speaker system that could project dinosaur roars out into the park is the most fabulous thing that's ever happened. Like, once I realized what was going on, because you hear the roar, you assume the T-Rex is somewhere nearby, because that's happened a million times by then, and then sort of the camera pulls back, and you see the kids are in the control center, just fucking around, projecting this sound out into the main area of the park. And it's too late. He already fucking broke his ankle. Like,
yeah, he's not getting back, and then he gets eaten by the compies, who...
It's pretty good. The compies have a neurotoxin in their spit that instills this sense of, like, calm and peace just
They're
before
like
you die.
vampires, I guess.
Yeah, I was like, they're really sounding like the Red Court vampires in Dresden Files.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Maybe they evolved into vampires. We don't know.
Maybe. So yeah, that whole thing with Hammond was great. What goes on with Grant and the two kids, most of it lines up completely with the movie.
It gets there. They have a couple more adventures than they did. Like we didn't have that super tense fence scene, but we did have them in the apiary.
Wait, we didn't have the super tense fence scene?
Yeah, when they're climbing the fence and it's about to turn on.
Oh, in the book we didn't have it. I got
Yeah.
you. I thought you were saying in the movie we didn't have it, but
Right.
yeah.
And not the apiary. That's where bees live. The aviary, where the pterodactyls are.
Yeah, that thing was... That scared me more than anything, almost.
Really?
Like, I think it's... He describes at one of these fireflies as having, like, a 6-foot wingspan. Or not fireflies, dragonflies.
I don't fucking get that. Like...
How is that possible? I have to think that was a misprint and that it was meant to be like a 6-inch wingspan.
No, they mentioned that they were enormous, so I'm kind of thinking that was another plot thread that was edited out and they missed a spot, you know? Because, we're just going to... Like, they also did it with the plants that Ellie was talking about.
Yeah.
So I feel like these were plot threads that got dropped but were not completely scrubbed, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really kept waiting for that plant thing to come back, but it does not. I thought that might be part of what Hammond's undoing would be, since he's like kind of out there with his broken ankle just trying to get back to his bungalow, and I figured maybe he would stop and like drink water out of a spot that was near one of those plants, and that would start to poison him, you know, something like that. But it's just kind of brought up as a first indicator that these people are playing with shit they don't get and haven't researched adequately.
And she never even brings it up.
I know, right? Like, that was the other thing, was I thought she would mention it as they went in and be like, hey, Mr. Hammond, I just thought you should know that the entrance to the park is lined with poison. But she doesn't say anything, which I thought was really strange. Right,
so I feel like there had to be some other plot thread, because, like, we have how they get the dino DNA from the amber. Right. But where, like, yes, the Jurassic was a time of enormous insects. Where the fuck did you get them, and why are you cloning them? Like, where are you getting this poisonous paleo botany from? Like, no answer there. So
yeah, that was the other thing. Was that where did that come from? Because you aren't getting that DNA from the mosquitoes aren't sucking the sap of plants. Right. It's not what they do. So, yeah. So, yeah, there are a couple moments where I was just kind of like waiting for something and then nothing really came of it.
Also, he could have consulted with Walt Disney there. You know, everything within arm's reach at Disneyland is edible.
Is it?
Yes. They specifically only planted plants that, like, not like, you're not going to make a salad with it, but it's going to be fine if a kid gets a mouthful.
That's a really smart idea.
Yeah.
Disney is such a crazy place. Like, I really get judgmental about adults who are like insane Disney fans. Even though I am an insane fan of certain things as well. I just, you know, we all judge the fandoms that we're not a part of, is usually how it goes. But I have to admit that the marketing strategies behind a lot of what goes on in the parks are genius and also almost dystopian in how
a little bit. But one thing I love about Disneyland, other than any other amusement park, is that waiting in line is not dreary. There's a bunch of cool stuff to look at, you know? And that's, you know, you're going to spend 60% of your day waiting in line. So, like, make it entertaining.
So, okay. I'm trying to back it up here and see what else, because what happens with Nedry is just basically exactly what happens in the movie. He takes the wrong turn, gets up against a spot where he can't go any further, gets out of the car, he slips and falls, and like there's the poisonous spitting whatever he's called.
The
Dilophosaur. And he gets taken down.
Right.
And I felt kind of bad for him. Like, they find his body later.
And they're like, what about him? And I can't blame them, but, like, Dennis.
Yeah. Same. I felt really weird about it. It was just like, what about... I mean, yeah, he brought this whole thing on. No doubt. He programmed things so that they couldn't be fixed without him unless they did this whole... So, yeah, no. I get it. But also, like, man, that is cold-blooded.
Yeah.
And actually, speaking of cold-blooded, our dinosaurs are not cold-blooded. In fact, they are warm, apparently. And the raptors are incorrect. This is something that I did not know until, I think, like a couple of years ago. There is the belief that the reason that they are called raptors when they are actually Deinonychus is because there was a book by Gregory Paul called Dinosaurs of the World, in which the Deinonychus was mislabeled as a subspecies of Velociraptor.
Right.
And that is the book that Crichton used for all of his information.
Right. I think real Velociraptors were about half the size.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is really...
I know this because I actually
undermine
did...
it.
Once in my life, I've played Dungeons and Dragons, and the first thing that happened is we got attacked by raptors, and I charmed one of them, and then I rode him. So,
Aw.
Yeah.
And the Dilophosaurus does not spit poison. That is not something, supposedly, like, we don't know, but you know.
There's, yeah, the venom or the narcotic effects of compy saliva. There's another thing that has popped up on the internet, and I'm not sure how true it is, but a lot of people have been saying that dinosaurs likely had feathers.
Right, right.
And we just were not prepared to accept these ridiculous-looking things because the scales look more intimidating, you know?
Yes. Yeah, there's something much more alien about them if they don't have feathers. And also, have you seen... There's a picture that's circulated. I don't know if I shared it on Facebook or not, but it's an owl without its feathers.
Yes, that's terrifying.
It is a straight-up dinosaur. 100%, guys. Like, go find that image. You'll be kind of upset by it, I'm sure.
Right. Because we don't really know what their skin was like, so...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all, you know, we're just kind of using what we know about present-day animals to inform. And yet, we are also not letting present-day animals inform. It's a weird sort of, like, dissonance.
Yeah.
You know, where we're like, well, I'm going to use the information that I want to apply. But once we start getting into territory where I don't like what I see, then I'm just going to ignore that shit. Mm-hmm. Which is similar to, like, what was the research on the erosion around the Sphinx. That there have been tons of scientists who have dated the Sphinx. And then when I say dated, like they went out for coffee.
The Sphinx would be a terrible date. Like, they'd want to play 20 questions or some shit. So,
but they made an estimation of when it was built, and then someone did this, like, kind of blind survey of presenting these same scientists with images from portions of the Sphinx, so you couldn't tell what the monument actually was. And they just asked, what do you see this erosion as? And all of them said it was water erosion. But then when it was revealed that they were talking about the Sphinx, they all backed off immediately and were like, oh, I'm not getting into this because that implies that our dates are completely wrong and I will lose all my funding.
Right.
So I'm not even going to touch that, even though obviously if I look at this completely objectively, what I've been saying is 100% wrong.
There's a lot of examples. I was just reading one the other day where the Association of Surgeons was so fucking offended that you say they should wash their hands before they do surgery because surgeons are gentlemen and gentlemen are clean.
Oh my God.
And it's these cultural things that we're just unwilling to deconstruct and get rid of is just a fucking problem. So.
Oh, that's something. Jesus Christ.
It's, who was it? Garfield? Our second assassinated president was likely killed because surgeons didn't wear gloves or wash their hands and
oh my God, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he got his ass shot and then they're like, let's dig the bullet out. And in modern medicine, it's like, no, hot metal is sterile. Leave it there.
Oh man.
Don't stick your nasty ass hand in there. That's gross.
That is super gross though.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're just squicking me out over here.
Sorry. So what was I about? Oh, the saddest part of the book that I'm really glad that they got rid of in the movie. When the adult raptors eat the baby raptors.
Oh my God, that was really, really rough.
That was traumatizing.
I was totally not prepared for that because they set up the baby raptor as being super affectionate and cute and nuzzling the kids when they first show up at the park because they keep them in the nursery until they're able to live on their own. So when they're still in the nursery, they're adorable and cuddly and wanting affection and warmth. And at the end of the movie, or the end of the book, forgive me, when the kids come across the baby, it jumps right into their arms and is nuzzling them again. And then the adult killer raptors are behind them, and he chucks the baby at them, hoping for it to distract them and that they'll want to, care for it. And instead, they're like, oh, we're going to eat this thing. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's supposed to be, male lions who kill the cubs that are not their progeny. Mm-hmm. But it was unnecessary and it was super traumatizing. So.
Yeah. There are a lot of portions of this book that were just a lot more gross than I expected. I mean, one of the first ones being the baby getting its face eaten by the compies that are clustered around its crib.
Yeah, that was pretty gross.
I found that actually to be kind of frustrating because I like the whole idea of these animals getting out and people not reporting it for various reasons. And there's a whole thing about the compy that gets partially eaten by a monkey, and they take its remains and submit it to be analyzed by different labs, and each of the labs doesn't mention this one key piece of information that might have gotten somebody else's attention because they assume XYZ.
Right.
And don't think that it's important enough to include in their report. Also,
God bless Alice Levin. I feel like Michael Crichton intentionally wrote a feminist unintentionally wrote a feminist point here in that the only person who can look at it and say, this is obvious what's going on. The rest of you assholes are just not paying attention. Mm-hmm. Is this one tech who has a kid who loves dinosaurs.
Right.
So.
But so I liked all of that, and I liked the idea behind it, that people are they don't communicate very well unless they really know what to talk about and whether or not it's relevant. But that baby, when it gets killed, the woman reports it as SIDS.
Yeah.
And tells the mother that that's what it was. You're going to sit there and tell me that she's going to report to the mother that it was sudden infant death. And the mother's not going to want to hold her baby before they bury it? Is that what you're going to try and tell me? That she isn't going to see this baby with its face fucking tore off? No.
He could have written into, like, maybe there's some superstition in this area of Costa Rica where a dead child is not to be touched and not to be mourned. Like, he could have done that.
He could have done
but he
anything.
didn't, yeah.
He just leaves it as like, oh, she just didn't report it. And I'm like, yeah, but the mom, though.
Right.
This one woman who is like the caretaker and the midwife is not the only person who's going to have contact with this baby. And to act like the mother's just going to take her at her word and not ask to see the body of her child is nonsense. And that really like hung me up for a little while. I got irritated about that one. But, you know, whatever. He clearly doesn't know what he's doing with female characters most of the time, so...
There's also an action scene that I'm super sad was not in the movie.
What's
and
that?
That's the one where Ellie runs across runs around trying to distract the raptors so Grant can get into the shed.
Right.
Because it's super adrenaline heavy. Like, she climbs a tree, they get Woo, she's distracting them from the bars, and she runs her ass and jumps into the pool, and then Muldoon lets her back in. Like, that was a super intense scene that probably would film really well.
They did a version of it in the movie, though.
Did
Do
they?
you remember? Yeah, she has to go out to turn back on the main power.
Right. But
and that whole sequence is her like having to get across this open area, and Muldoon gets eaten then.
That's right,
because he's kind of like her backup. So I feel like they just cut because it feels like everybody's trying to get to this one spot, and they had Arnold go first and get killed. So they basically just like cut all of the middlemen who tried it first and had her be the first one to head out there.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, well, no, Arnold also gets eaten there, so we see his arm.
Oh, right, because Arnold's Samuel L. Jackson.
Right.
Right?
And,
yeah.
So there's also another piece of trivia I learned on the internet is that they... do you remember when she was limping running back?
Yes.
And there's no explanation for it?
Is there not?
No,
Okay.
there's not, because something that didn't make it into the final cut is she was supposed to trip and fall over his leg. His leg is an actual thing that exists, and some dude actually bought both the arm and the leg on eBay.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my god. He paid an arm and a leg for it.
You're fired.
Oh god. Yeah, so I think that was part of what, like, I appreciated that she was given something to do in the book, because once we get to this point, I started to be like, does she even do that in the book? Like, did they just add that because the movie producers were aware? We gotta have one woman, for Christ's sake. Like, and I was glad that, and it turns out that what the Raptors are doing with playing along with her is turning the tables and distracting her.
Right.
Because that's when they get Woo.
Right.
Woo, does he die in the movie? I don't even remember what happens to him.
According to... I haven't seen Jurassic World, but apparently he's the bad guy in it.
Oh, that's right! I remember now, because I went to see it, and he pops up, and I was like, holy shit, it's the same actor.
Yeah.
That's right. And they're doing the thing that he had suggested in the book, which is making them more aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
And
it's,
like what people would expect.
Make them cuddly and cute and want to be petted. And like, I am all about that. I want a pet raptor.
Oh God, I don't. Thank you very much.
No. We have to talk about the raptors, because there's this giant fucking hole in this book that drives me insane. Like, the last 50 pages of this book, like, after they get the power back up, there's really no tension going on other than Hammond getting his ass eaten, and we were kind of cheering for that anyway.
Correct.
But then they decide to go out and count the raptors.
Yeah, this definitely felt like something that, like, when I think about this book in 5 years, I will straight up just cut this portion out of my memory.
I have read this book so many times, and I think I cut it out every time.
Yep.
So they go out, they find, like, one, we have no answer as to, like, because the raptors have a separate paddock because they are too fucking dangerous, and Dennis Nedry was smart enough to not turn off that electric fence when he left. Right?
Yeah.
How, like, I get that some of the other animals could be breeding and running around, following the roads and the moats and other places that it's hard for the, like, they've learned where they can be seen and where they can't. The raptors are completely enclosed. How did they get out?
Tunnels?
Did they start breeding in there? I mean, if they've got tunnels, then how the fuck is turning off the raptor paddock fences make a damn bit of difference?
I don't know.
I don't have an answer for that. And then suddenly, like, Ellie and Gennaro and Grant are just they're just laying there, and the baby raptors see them and want to nuzzle on them, and the adult raptors just don't notice.
That kept pissing me off.
Yeah, I did not understand, and it's building to this moment where Grant realizes that they want to migrate, and I'm like, well, that's cute and heartwarming, but what the fuck? Like, you couldn't, like, have them looking at them in the paddock and say that, you know?
Yeah, I didn't really understand why the raptors are super perceptive and can hear and see so well, except when they're right fucking there in a cavern where one would assume the echo would be, like, incredible.
Right.
They're just completely unaware of them being right the fuck there.
Right.
That whole thing really irked me. And also, the whole thing is supposed to be that they're going down to count the raptors so that they can get a sense of how many have been bred, so that they can keep count of how many are on the island and get an estimation of how many have left so
right,
far.
but they don't know how many have been eaten.
Nope.
They don't know how many have drowned. They don't know how many got off. Like, it's... Grant, this is fucking stupid. Like, I liked you yelling at Gennaro, even though he kind of didn't deserve it. I know he was a proxy for all of the other investors who were looking the other way. But for fuck's sake, dude.
Yeah, that was an awkward moment for me when Grant yells at him, because I really felt like Crichton wanted me to cheer him on and be like, yeah, that's right, hold somebody responsible. But, like,
Everybody who's
Gennaro was
responsible
the
is
one
dead.
person who showed up going, hey, this doesn't seem like a good idea. All of this seems super unsafe. I don't know if we should go through with this. Like, Gennaro, if anything, was the one person trying to be responsible throughout.
Right.
And then it seemed almost like he had been too upstanding, and Crichton turned around and had to make him the coward in going into this raptor nest at the end in order to, like, create some sort of despicable thing for the audience to hate about him.
Right.
When previously he had been the voice of reason, if anything, as compared to Hammond. It was just a weird turnaround where I genuinely stopped and, like, read up a real quick, like, Wikipedia summary of Gennaro to make sure that I was remembering him as the right character from the beginning of the book.
Right.
I straight up thought, do I have this wrong? Is this the other guy that I thought got killed? And no, it's the same guy. He's just behaving very differently because now we need somebody to hold accountable, and Hammond's dead. So I guess we can't.
Right. I wonder if, like, was it, like, maybe in an earlier draft Gennaro was a bad guy? I'm not sure. So
yeah.
I mean, it's
the whole idea of going in there and counting the way that they did is just so it would be so inaccurate and imperfect that the risk of doing it just does not outweigh. Like, there's simply no reason to do it the way that they wanted to do it. It's stupid. It's foolish. Like, yeah, I couldn't get behind that at all. And Grant constantly being like, we have to. I just didn't buy it, not for a second.
I did not either. So I'm not sure why that was there, and it's I guess Crichton had kind of hit that point where, you know, that Stephen King point where, like, your editor can't tell you no.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I don't understand that part. So what
and
else
then there
haven't
was,
we talked
like,
about?
There's a whole kind of sense of urgency created in the book by the fact that they see compies on a ship that's headed out.
Oh, those
and
were raptors.
Oh, were they baby raptors?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, whatever it was they saw, there's this, like, through line of, well, we have to get back in time to tell them not to let the ship dock and open up and, you know, whatever. And it's a really weird thing to do when the audience already knows that there are tons of raptors already on that island.
Not only, but Grant knows it too, because he was in conversation with Alice Levin, who was showing him the X-ray of something that was found in Costa Rica. This was off the island on the mainland. Like, Grant should be able to put together that animals have gotten off the island already, so why do you care about 2 more baby raptors enough? Like, yeah. That's
like something that I kept thinking, that was another thing similar to Ellie noticing the plant that I really thought was going to be brought back and isn't. It's the impetus for the concern about the island is finding this sample and people like talking about this thing. But I really thought that Grant was going to bring up, so probably that sample is the thing. Because Gennaro, in the very beginning of this landing at the island, is telling them, oh, I'm having it airlifted, the sample, so that we can take a look at it and you can look at it too. But then that gets completely dropped. And there's no... I feel like the whole direction of the book would have gone a different way if they had followed up on that. Because I imagine noticing that... Also, if he's getting it airlifted, why don't they land? Where did they... Because they were supposed to, like, be there that day, right?
Right.
Where did they go?
I don't understand. Like, I would have been... We sort of have 2 things going on at once. We have the control room and everything breaking down, and we have Grant and the kids trying to survive. I would have been up for another character who is trying... Like, maybe even that IRS dude. Or, not the IRS dude, the EPA dude, like, trying to figure out what's going on. Yeah?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I just... It was a weird thing to introduce, and you could easily have left out the part where Gennaro's saying that they're bringing the sample to the island. Just leave that out.
Right.
And then we wouldn't have any, we wouldn't be sure. Grant could have his suspicions about it, but he wouldn't know for sure. But we end the book with this sort of open-ended, like, oh, you're stuck for questioning because the Costa Rican government is not happy about how this whole thing went down. And do you know for sure that there are some escaped dinosaurs? No, I don't know for sure, but I suspect it. But you do know for sure, though. That sample didn't get delivered to the island, so one has to suspect that sample's floating around somewhere still that you could take a look at and know for sure, right?
Right. It's exactly.
They're acting like it's this big mystery.
Also, he's got, like, they put it together when, like, they're eating chickens and corn and soybeans, so, like, they're surviving the lysine contingency. You've got your answer, Grant. I don't know what you're... I guess, I don't know, maybe Grant is sort of bought into, like, we need to keep this quiet and just let them napalm the whole thing, because I could kind of see Grant saying, you know what, let's just let these animals go and see if they survive,
Yeah. Yeah, I just, I don't know. So, like I said, I enjoyed this a lot more than I expected, and I thought that there were a lot of really interesting ideas about, like, the park itself and managing these people that were fascinating to me as somebody who's, like, super into planning things and events and all of that. But, yeah, there were a few moments that I felt it just would have been really easy to simply leave it out, and then I wouldn't have the question in the first place. And I'm glad that you brought that one up with the sample, because I had forgotten all about that, but that did continue to bother me while I was reading. And then I just sort of wrote it off by the time I got to the end, as you do.
So it's also clear to me that this book kind of follows what we have now of the formula. Like, let's do one big blockbuster, and if it does really well, we'll do 2 more, and then if it does well again, we're going to have a never-ending franchise forever, right? Because this is where I kind of want to talk a little bit about the postscript and the sequel. Mm-hmm. So I hope you don't mind spoilers, or itty-bitty spoilers, not big plot ones. But the second book has very little to do with the second movie.
Okay. Well, I kind of figured that, since the implications from the first book seem to be mostly what the second movie is about.
Right.
It doesn't feel like it would be necessary to go into other material yet, when you're, like, the first one's got enough for a second movie in it.
Yeah. Well, the setting is true. So, the setting of the second movie is real. It's like, Hammond did have another island where he had more animals that he was kind of working with before he got to the finished versions, Mm-hmm. And that's the idea here. Now, as far as what happened in between, like, it turns out Malcolm is alive, and for that reason, because they could get Jeff Goldblum back, but not Alan Grant. or what's his name? Sam Neill.
Oh,
and then
right,
and then they kill, like, there's an offhand comment that there's, like, someone's mentioning, oh yeah, this thing happened on Isla Nublar, but all the witnesses are dead, and they specifically bring up 3 people: Dennis Nedry, Robert Muldoon, and Donald Gennaro, which breaks my fucking heart.
I don't, like... Why? Okay, yeah.
So, but there is something that... The second book is more tedious, in that there's a lot more talking about stuff than actually doing stuff.
Gotcha. Okay.
At least for the first half.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like Michael Crichton heard those feminist criticisms of Ellie Sattler, because the real hero of the second one is Sarah Harding. Like, she has 90% of the badassness that happens in that book. And the other 10% is done by a 12-year-old girl.
Hey, so he maybe learned, so that's nice.
Oh, yeah, he totally learned. Like, all the men in that fucking book are fucking useless. It's it's a weird 180, and it has some, like, the best exchange between the Sarah Harding and the little girl, and she hands her a tranquilizer gun. One of those big sniper rifle looking ones.
Mm-hmm.
And she she stands up a motorcycle. She's like, load that thing up. And the girl's like, I don't know how to shoot. And she turns back, do you know how to ride a motorcycle? No. Then you're shooting. Get on. So, yeah, this...
that's nice to hear that he actually learned, though. Appreciate it.
He learned, like, it's a really strange thing where all the men constantly need to be saved by this woman who, by the way, is on the island because Lewis Dodgson threw her overboard because she was the only one who knew where.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Like, it's...
That's kind of, like, I almost wonder if he didn't do it, like, purposely go over the top with having her rescue everybody, as if to sort of be like, hey, fuck you guys, fine, you want a strong woman, I'll make her the only strong person, and did not anticipate that all of us would be like, good, yes, this is what we wanted, thank you.
It's especially, like, I've been watching Twitter lately with all the kids from that high school, and, like, there's this great thing Marco Rubio tweeted out, well, if you block this, you're going to have to block this exact same gun, and then everyone's like, perfect, thanks for pointing that out, let's ban them both. And it's also, like, in the Me Too movement, it's like, hey, we're going to stop flirting and hugging with you, women. Great. Men, no, that was a threat.
Right? 100%. Thank you. Yeah. There's a lot of, like, this is the future liberals want that gets shared from genuine conservatives who think that they're being really insulting. And I'm looking at it going, yes, it is.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
I don't see the problem here.
So, yeah, and it's, I don't want to ascribe that Michael Crichton did not learn, because from this point on, the women seem to take a much bigger role and are much more active in his work.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I still think that the second book is super worth reading, even though, like, this was one that the studios figured out. This does not really translate very well into an ongoing series, so we're going to do our own thing. And you don't have to write this anymore. And I think he's probably done with dinosaurs by that point, so... Yeah. I wanted to move on to things. I did want to mention some of his other books, because this is I super like. The Andromeda Strain it's kind of like reading his first, it is his first book. Okay. But it's got a lot of the same elements, a lot of the same adrenaline, and a lot of the action with scientists combined with, like, this super not cerebral, but, like, learning about things. You know? Okay. Mm-hmm. And he always does, like, even Harding, who we haven't even brought up yet because he's so just there for no reason. He does try to do the Stephen King thing where these minor characters, you find out what's going on with their lives. Right. And then you never hear from them again, which is something I really like. He's not as good at it as King is, but it does give them just enough flavor that we care. Like, it doesn't bother you that he gave them a nickname, you know?
Right, yeah.
So the Andromeda Strain is pretty good. Eaters of the Dead is bullshit. I got, like, maybe a chapter into it. He wrote a book which I did not expect. It's like some kind of detective story called Airframe, where it's not a plane crash, it's a plane accident. Like, something fucked up goes up goes on in the air, and it's this woman who works for PR for I think it's Boeing, has to figure out what is happening in the midst. So like there's a union dispute going on, so and then there's this bitchy reporter who works for basically Dateline, trying to spin a story about how this plane is a death trap, and it's super engaging, and I love it. So and finally there's the book that if you're going to read any Michael Crichton book, it has to be Sphere, and don't see the movie. Which
I like. Is Sphere? No, I'm thinking of Cell with J-Lo.
Yeah.
Who was in Sphere?
It was Dustin Hoffman and Sharon Stone and Samuel L. Jackson, but don't even bother.
Samuel L. Jackson. I knew he was in it. Okay.
Also, Queen Latifah's in it. So. But yeah, like Sphere is about, and this one is strangely told from the perspective of this one dude. It is, you don't get in anyone else's head, which is a really strange choice for him. But he's a psychologist, and he's part of a plane crash response team, and it's set in like 1985, and his job is basically to go to plane crash sites and sort of, talk down the survivors, right? And sort of ease their transition back into the real world. But he gets taken to a Navy aircraft carrier in the middle of the Pacific, and they find out that there's a fucking spaceship under the water that has been there for 300 years.
I'm thinking maybe I don't want to say I watched it. I'm thinking that I had this movie on in the background when it was like on television at some point.
Yeah, and I that I think is his most powerful work, and I'm not gonna lie, there's some problems. He has there's a female character and a black character, and they tend to say some things that white dudes on Reddit think these people say.
Gotcha.
But it's like, if you can, that's the only real flaw I see with the book, and it was the 80s. He has gotten better, or he did get better after that. So
yeah.
So if you're looking for more Crichton work, definitely go there. I was a Crichton fanboy. I kind of gave up on when it got to Timeline, but yeah. So this book, there was a good 5-year stretch where I insisted that the book was better than the movie.
I mean, I could understand that.
Well, it's what I realized about myself while reading this book is, let's remember I was 12 and 13. So I was not allowed to see rated R movies. So I had this kind of thing where anything that had sex and violence that I was not allowed to consume was inherently better. And like Jurassic Park has a lot more violence and a lot more blood and a lot higher stakes. So I was like, oh, this is so much better. Now, that's what I attributed it to. But why did I actually like it better than the movie? And I think it was because of Gennaro, because of the fact that we're not just watching Grant. There's actual things happening in the control room that are also high stakes and well-developed characters. So
I think when I say that I got really invested in the logistics and everything, that's what I mean, is that it doesn't come down to just being about dinosaurs. Like, what it is about is also fucking Hammond watching people around him die and still thinking about how he can just try again.
Right.
Like, he's walking around with a plan to reopen in Japan instead or somewhere else. Like, this guy will not fucking listen. And I think that was what I found really compelling, is that they're having arguments about, like, just management stuff and how much bullshit like that will factor into when you're dealing with creatures that can rip your face off. The, like, overall fate of a human being it comes down to a couple of idiots in a control room,
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah. Well, read this book, guys. I think you'll find it really interesting. And, although there are the holes that we pointed out, it's a fast-moving book.
Yeah, it's super. It's both popcorn and satisfying.
Yeah, I did the audiobook and got it listened to in like 4 days. I think I flew through it. It was a 15-hour audiobook. I think this one.
Right.
But the only thing that I didn't love about it was the narrator at sometimes over dramatized to a point that I was just like, all right, guy, calm down. with the way that he would describe action. You know?
Yeah, that's totally fair.
I was just like, yeah, you could just read it though. It's okay. But he did do voices pretty well, and he really made Lex annoying. Holy shit.
He made, like, I wasn't a fan of Muldoon until I heard him do it, because I'm like, oh, yeah, now I see what Crichton was going to with this character.
Yeah, I think when you said that they had Muldoon in the movie, the fact that he wasn't a black guy, I just, like, didn't even register that it was supposed to be the same character, because you get a whole other idea of what this guy's experiences and viewpoint would be as a man who's, like, been part of an area that's, like, colonized and treating, like, animals as sports, basically.
Right. And he knows about animal behavior, and he's, like, understands safety, and he understands when shit hits the fan, like, what needs to be done. He's the only one who does.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And he's drunk the whole time. Imagine how great it would be if he was sober.
Oh my god, that's true. I forgot that he starts drinking. All right, sir. Well, would you like to plug your show?
Sure. So, it hasn't aired yet. It's going to air in 2 days, but Buffy the Vampire Slayer is back. Bitches and Money of Unscrupled with Bitches and Money fame are back, and we just finished season 4, and we're super excited to get into season 5 and season 2 of Angel. So, yeah, I super dug the last, like, I'm finally, like, really into Angel. So.
Angel was I preferred it to Buffy.
I mean, that's fair, but let's be honest, Joss Whedon takes a while to hit his stride.
He did.
And I'm always a little salty that so many other better people aren't given the leeway that he is. So.
Agreed. 100%
right.
Agreed.
And I hate saying it, but Shonda Rhimes is bullshit. Like,
listen,
what?
I agree.
And
I feel like I have to whisper that I agree, but I quit Scandal for a reason.
Yeah, and I quit How to Get Away with Murder, and it's like, you know, if she did miniseries, she'd be amazing. You know?
Yeah, she just goes on for too long.
She starts strong and kind of runs out of ideas and goes, let's throw some more shit at the wall. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, How to Get Away with Murder, I gave up after 5 episodes. I was just like, you know what? I can see where this is going, and in that it is not going anywhere, and I'm out.
Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, that's our show. So what's next month's book?
What is next month's book? Good question, sir. Let's find out, shall we? I really need to get that whole section of the website back up, too, because I had a nice little calendar area where you could go and take a look at all of that, and I haven't rebuilt it. March, Jurassic Park. April, The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I'm sorry. Who's your co-host? And I'm not saying this because I hate this book. I'm saying this because I've heard
heavy
people.
Book, right?
Yeah, it sounds like the narrator is Death, and
cool.
it's set. It's the protagonist is a little girl in Germany in the 30s. So yeah,
right. Yeah, I did see like the previews for the film, The Book Thief, which had what's his face in it from Quills. Can't remember his name. But so I knew about the setting and everything, but that's about it. But don't spoil me.
Oh, I don't know. I've only heard people talk about it, so that's all I know about the book.
But yeah, I'm going into The Book Thief with the same attitude that I had going into The Kite Runner, which was a gorgeous book that ripped me to shreds. I recommend reading The Kite Runner 100%, but also, like, you know, be ready, because it will kill you.
Be in a really good headspace when you do that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Book Thief, and then in May is A Dirty Job by Christopher Moore. I've never even heard of that one, so. Me neither. Yeah, there's a bunch of them on here that I hadn't heard of. Dead Until Dark, which is the October book, is the, first book in the whole True Blood series. Didn't even know the title of it. Had no idea. Didn't even know there was a True Blood book, so. Oh, yeah, wow. I didn't know that you didn't know that. It's a huge series, like, sprawling kind of thing. But, yeah. So, yeah, anyway, guys, if you're interested in checking out, like, the rest of the calendar,
you can go to facebook.com/group/unspoiled book club. And that is a group that's open to everybody, just to talk about the books that we're reading that month and what we think and whatnot. I'd really love to be able to do more book club episodes than once a month, and I'm considering doing that in the future. At the moment, I have to stick with once a month, but I really enjoy doing them, and I can fly through the audiobooks of most books quickly. So
I'm up for a whole Michael Crichton.
Oh my God.
6 months. No, sorry. I just this book has given me the itch, and I kind of want to go read all. I wish I hadn't given away all my books because I kind of want to go read all of those again. So
yeah, that's I totally understand what you mean. I reread an old book that I found in Half Price Books that was one of my favorites as a kid, and it sparked something, and now I'm hardcore into everything that I read as a kid again. Right. I've just been flying through Chronicles of Narnia and Secret Garden and Anne of Green Gables, all of them. I don't know. Some things will just do that to you, especially when you haven't revisited them in a long time. All right. Well, everybody, thank you again so much for listening. You can leave a review and help us out by leading other people to the show. You can go to facebook.com/unspoiledpod and follow us on there and, keep abreast of what new stuff we're doing. You can go to Twitter at Unspoiled Show and follow us there for a little chit chats and conversation and fun times. And I'm also on Instagram at Unspoiled Podcast. And I think that's everything.
Yeah, this was fun. I'm so glad I said dibs first.
Yes, same. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again, and we will see you next month with The Book Thief. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.